are great snakes.
Just like Fort David,
Just like the Vito with an egg. Isn't they have problems? Isn't they have
You're getting close. I am 59. Oh my God.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
That clock's a few minutes slow, so if you go by that clock, we're actually going to be starting late. So good morning. Got a really exciting mingle with Mike this morning, and going to be doing it a little bit differently. Usually I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, but this morning I do. Because I want to share some relevant information about hurricane preparedness, and then we have a guest speaker with us, Tom Dunn, emergency manager from Hilton Head Island, is going to be sharing some information about how evacuations take place on Hilton Head Island, and then actually how you get back to the island after the hurricane. So really excited to have Tom Dunn here with us today. So it's going to be action-packed, a lot of information, and so I'm going to move quickly through my part and then turn it over to Tom. Is this anyone's first time here with Mingle with Mike? So welcome. So I do 2 communications a month. The second Thursday of the month I do what is called a Mingle with Mike, which is really just sharing updates with you in terms of what's going on in the community, and then it's open forum, so to speak. Folks can ask questions, whatever's on your mind, and we'll get the answers to you. We'll break down the issues here. So it's really been a good opportunity for folks to share what's on their mind, and talk about what's going on in the community. And then the 4th Thursday of the month, I do what is called a town hall. It's a more formal setting. I have a PowerPoint presentation, and there's more structure to it, and lots of times I'll have presenters. And so that's the 4th Thursday of the month. So 2 main communications a month. That's not the only way we communicate, but these are 2 key communications from your executive director. So really quickly with the agenda. If I can get it moving. All right, I'll do it manually. Might need some new batteries. So this is our agenda. Just really 2 key items today. Myself, I got some updates with the hurricane in regards to hurricanes, and then Mr. Dunn will be speaking. So if you remember, over the last couple of months, we've been talking about hurricanes, and specifically there was a hurricane packet that we had sent out to. It's like Tom's got one. I sent out a packet, hurricane informational packet, that we requested each member to fill out and get back to us in regards to our new approach to evacuations. Were you going to evacuate independently, or did you need assistance, and were you going to evacuate? No? And were you going to evacuate with tide points? So we might have to do it manually. I don't know what's going on. So these are the numbers that have come in so far. We have 162 independent evacuations, and then we have almost 90 evacuees that are going to be going with tide points. So the reason I bring that up, thanks, Tom. The reason I bring that up is because I want to hold some additional informational meetings for folks to further break down any concerns, questions, talk about some of the issues that might come up if we need to evacuate, and give you as much information as possible to prepare yourself for any storms that might come in, where we need to evacuate. So this past weekend was a good, This sort of give us a reality check, right? Chantel came through off the coast of South Carolina, and tropical storms, like, oh, just a tropical storm, but you see what happened when it got to North Carolina, right? Massive flooding. Matter of fact, I was talking to some members this morning at the breakfast table, and we were talking about tropical storm Agnes that came up into Maryland many, many years ago. It was devastating for the state. So even tropical storms, they might not pack a big punch with winds, although it's still pretty powerful. The rain can really be very impactful. So we got to take each storm seriously and be prepared for it. Okay, this is not cooperating. So, I wanted to share with you, I just shared that I wanted to hold some additional meetings. So I plan to hold 2 more additional meetings for members that, 1, evacuate on their own, and 2, members that are going to be evacuating with Tide Point. So there'll be separate meetings. They're going to be next Thursday, July 17th, and I would encourage you to attend. You can attend both if you like. We just ask you to sign up just to make sure we get enough chairs and enough room, because we could get pretty strong attendance with this. So each meeting is going to cover relevant details to your specific plan, and we'll be able to get some additional feedback from you to see where we need to lean in and get more information to, if we can get into that situation, to make this as seamless as possible in an emergent situation. So for those that are self-evacuating, next Thursday, July 17th from 10 to 11, right here in the ballroom, please sign up on the app or call Lifestyle to get signed up. And then right after that, at 11 o'clock, we're going to have the second meeting where we will be talking with individuals that are going to be evacuating with Tide Point. So once again, sign up either on the app or by calling Lifestyle. So I'm going to throw this out to the group here. So when do we evacuate?
When the governor says.
Right, when the governor says so. So generally the governor calls evacuation. We are going to know ahead of time because we got a care center. Generally we're going to know at least 24, maybe a little bit earlier if there's going to be an evacuation call, which is helpful for us. We'll talk more about that next Thursday. I do want to share one other slide. Next Thursday, for those members that are going to be evacuating with Tide Point that might need additional assistance, we're going to have one of our partners here with us, Right at Home. So Right at Home is a company that can help you with caregivers. So if there is going to be a need for you to have caregivers, they will be here talking about the resources that they have for you all. Or maybe you're gonna evacuate independently and you might need some help as well, so they can do it either way. But they're going to be with us next Thursday. Thank you. Thursday to talk about what resources they can help with. And then last, before I turn it over to Tom, 2 weeks from today, July 24th, is going to be the town hall meeting. We got a lot of some changes coming up in dining. So we're going to be moving over to the fast casual. That's going to be starting in just a couple weeks. So this will be a good opportunity to get some feedback and for us to be able to share some additional information about that dining experience with you. So I would encourage you to come and join us. All right, it works. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom. Let me just change the slide presentation here. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. You guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, again, my name's Tom Dunn. I'm the emergency manager for the town of Hilton Head Island. Just a little bit about me. I've been here for 13 years. Historically, I've been in the public safety world my entire life, starting as a volunteer firefighter at 18. I did some time in the city of Alexandria in Virginia as a firefighter. My back decided it was probably not the best career line for me to stay in for long periods of time, so I shifted over to emergency management in the 04-05 time frame, and have been doing that ever since. So, and I've also got Sherry Gendrick with me. She's our floodplain administrator. I'll let her introduce herself when she gets up here. So let's talk hurricanes. Before we go to hurricanes, I want to talk about the town's overarching emergency management program. So the town has a large-scale emergency management program. That program encompasses the entire town. One of the things I set out to do almost 3 years ago was to be accredited through the Emergency Management Accreditation Program. That's an international organization that accredits emergency management programs throughout the world. So like I said, we set out to do that about 3 years ago, and in 2024, at the end of 2023, we became accredited through the Emergency Management Accreditation Program. I say that because of how challenging that is. So we had to write to 66 individual standards in the program. So as you can see, here's one standard that has 29 elements that have one standard. We had to do 66 of these types of standards. So we had to write to these, here's what we do, here's why we do it, here's how we do it. And then they sent a team of 8 or 9 people down and actually toured our EOC, interviewed our staff, looked at our facilities. They did a deep dive into our program, and then ultimately accredited our program within their program. The other thing that's really cool about that is, oops, did I hit the right button? Is there are only 2 programs in the state of South Carolina that are accredited. One is this County of Charleston, and the other is the state of South Carolina. So we are one of 3 in the entire state that are accredited. The other 2 things that I think are really cool is we are the smallest by population. So we're the smallest program in the United States that's accredited through them. The next location close to us that's been accredited in population is over 120,000 more people than we are. So we are very small in that entire program. And to my knowledge, we are the only program that has an emergency management staff of 1 that they have ever accredited. I'll take that. All right, so before we deep dive into hurricanes, let's touch on other hazards that we're concerned about. Let's do, whichever one you want. So let's talk about other hazards that impact the island. What are other hazards that we need to be concerned about? All right, I got flooding over here. Flooding's a great one. What else? Wind, yes. Wildfires is another one, yes. What else? Who said wind? There your hand. Yeah. What other kind of, if we talk about wind and storms, what other things are we talking about? Tornadoes, exactly right. Throw your hand up and hit tornado. Yep. What else? All right, storm surge. We'll give you flooding on that one. Exactly right. Anything else that comes to mind? Ooh, that's loud. Anything else come to mind for here? Trees. All right, we'll give you severe weather. Throw your hand up in here. Don't worry. Yes, ma'am, over here. Traffic. Fair point. Fair point. Exactly. Prolonged power outage. I'll give you that one. Okay. Anything else? There's a couple that you guys have probably missed. What do we get once in a blue moon that will shut this whole place down? Ice, snow, winter weather, right? We just had a big old blizzard, right? It was pretty impressive. Whole, what, 3 inches. But it shut us down. There's 2 more things that you guys probably, or 3 that we may impact us.
Hospital.
Well, losing the hospital was a big one, but not quite where I'm going. Let's see how we did. All right, so we got wind, we got tornadoes, we didn't get earthquakes, did we? Exactly. Right? The earthquakes are a big one right here. We have 30 to 40, even sometimes 50 earthquakes a year in South Carolina. So we have a lot of earthquakes, especially the Charleston, Columbia area and that whole area. We got winter weather, hurricanes are given. How about tsunamis? Who thought we had a tsunami risk here on Hilton Head Island? Yeah, we do. It is a low probability, high impact event. A tsunami here looks much different than you see on TV and on YouTube and places like that. It's not going to be these massive waves that are coming in. It'll be a small, low fast moving wave after wave after wave. I've heard some of the people who talk about the tsunamis here, it's like a machine gun like a machine gun of waves coming on shore. So our tsunami plan obviously includes a shore beach, is to really evacuate the beach probably the equivalent of 2 to 3 blocks, and then or up in hotels or in elevators. So we do have a plan. It's a low probability event, but it's still a risk. Y'all get pandemics, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's a reality. How about terrorism? Who even remotely thought about terrorism at all? Why would that even be a thought for you?
It's a nice place to visit.
Exactly. See, you're correct. It is very transient, right there. You look at the camera on the bridge every Saturday and Sunday. What do you see? Huge volumes of people coming in. That's a great place to hide, isn't it? Great place to hide, plan an event, and execute it somewhere else, right? But what else do we have in Beaufort County and on the island that could be a concern?
We have military.
Military, right? We got a bunch of military in Beaufort County. What else happens here every April? Golf tournament. How many people does that bring in? Exactly. So it's a lot of people coming into an isolated area. So that's why terrorism is on that list. All right. So we'll switch back to hurricanes. So this is the hurricane forecast from 2024. As you can see, the National Weather Service and Colorado State made their predictions. Colorado State in April, the Hurricane Center in May. So average season is right around 16, 6, and 3. So they predicted a little bit above average season last year, right? So let's see how they did. There we go, 18, 11, and 5. So it was a little bit above average seasons. They were in the wheelhouse. They were pretty close. And here's just a visual representation of the storms that we had last year. And obviously the two of them are Helene and Debbie. That kind of gave us a little bit of scare, but not too much. Put us to work. Debbie put us to work more than Helene did, but still impacted us a little bit. There it is. So 2025, that's their forecast for the coming season. 1794, that's just a tick above an average season, right? Just a tick above. So I show all these things because they're interesting. There's a lot of science involved in it, especially Colorado State. They've got a whole department that does nothing but hurricane research and have been doing it for several decades. It's cool, the science is good, the science helps with the forecast, but what do these numbers mean to us? Nothing, really. Because how many does it take for us to have a bad day? One. Exactly right. So one storm they could put 150 and 5 up there, and it doesn't matter if we get hit by one, right? So these numbers are interesting, but there's a lot of good science that goes behind it that does help the overall programs. Before I turn it over to Sherry, I want to talk a little bit about the categories. Right? Everybody familiar with the Saffir-Simpson scale? Right, 1 through 5 in hurricanes, and if you watch social media, there's a category 6 or 7 out there, but they don't exactly exist. So with categories 1 through 5, Saffir-Simpson scale, what does it not include? What do you not see up there?
Water.
Right, water, rain, right, the whole picture of the storm, right? So don't focus on it's just a category 1. You could have a category 1 with 6, 8, 9, 10 feet of storm surge, and a category 3 with 4 feet of storm surge. So don't pay attention to just the category. Make sure you pay attention to the entire picture, everything that's going on with that storm and the information that comes along with it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sherry and let her introduce herself.
Thank you, Tom. My name is Sherry Bendrick, and I'm the floodplain administrator for the town of Hilton Head Island. I have been with the town for just over 8 years, but I have been in floodplain management for over 20 years. Oh, it's not. Well, I talk loud, so hang on. All right, how about now? You guys can hear me?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I got hair and glasses to contend with, so hopefully I'm not, and I move around a lot, so hopefully I'm not gonna rip this out. So I'll actually try to stay still. But I'm the town's floodplain administrator. I've been with the town of Hilton Head for about 8 years. However, I have been a floodplain manager for over 20 years, which is almost all of my career. I came here from Columbia County, Georgia. So when I was in there, it's an inland area, so I dealt mostly with riverine flooding and flood studies because it was a newly developed area. But here we have a whole different hazard. We deal with coastal flooding, we deal with rainfall events, and we deal with storm surge. So I'm going to talk to you about the water that's involved with all that wind when a hurricane comes in. Thanks. Sorry. Need to have a special delivery set. Thank you. So I'm going to talk to you about a few things first. Of course, the number one thing that I like to talk about is know your flood hazard. We are a barrier island. We do drive over a bridge to get here. We are surrounded on all sides by some water. So it is very important that you know your flood zone. Beaufort County entered the National Flood Insurance Program in 1977, which is when the first flood maps became available to the town. Then in 1984, the town was incorporated. So those flood maps were then in turn adopted by the town of Hilton Head. We used to regulate by 1986 flood maps. I'll touch on that in just a few minutes. Those are our legacy flood maps. And then in 2021, FEMA was kind enough to give us new flood maps. So does anybody know what these flood maps show you? Commonly called the 100-year floodplain, right? Does that mean you're gonna flood once in every 100 years? No, they are probability maps that actually show a 1% chance of flooding by a certain amount of rainfall in any given year. So just because they're commonly known as flood maps and people refer to it as a 100-year floodplain, could happen 1% chance in any given year. Oops, sorry about that. So it's very important, again, that you know your flood zone. There are several zones that are shown on the maps. Zones X and shaded X are the low and moderate risk zones. If you live in a condo or have a home that you have a mortgage, you're not federally required to carry flood insurance. Zones AE and VE are the high risk and the coastal high hazard zones. In those areas, you are required to purchase flood insurance. And then if you're in zone AO, it's an area of shallow flooding. That's also a federal purchase requirement. So I told you I'd talk about these 1986 maps. It's very important that I tell you guys about this so you can really understand the risk in our community. On this map, keep going wrong button. On this map, the areas that are in blue and green and yellow right here are the areas that are in the high risk zone. These areas that are unshaded are considered the low risk zone. I want to point out, let me get my bearings really quick. So here's Broad Creek, here is Arrow Road. So we're situated right about here on these maps. And so previously on the 1986 maps, this area was mapped in the high risk zone. Then FEMA was kind enough to publish new maps that became effective in 2021. I put the hurricane flag up here because I have a huge caution when we talk about these new flood maps and how they relate to flood insurance. The maps were developed and published. They were published in 2018, but the mapping and the modeling was completed in 2015. What had not yet happened in our community in 2015? Matthew, and I heard somebody say it. What happened after Matthew? Irma, very good. I'm glad that you guys pointed that out, and I was going to point it out anyways. However, Irma was a huge flooding event for our community because of storm surge, which I'm going to talk to you about in just a minute. So here are the March 23rd, 2021 flood maps. Take these guys with a grain of salt. We are still located in this area, but you can see that some areas of 10 Point have now been mapped out of the high risk zone, which means as a resident, if you had a mortgage on your home, you could drop your flood insurance. I will be completely honest with you. I live on the north end of the island. I am in the area, let's see, I'm like right over here. I'm in the low risk zone. I have a ground floor bedroom. With my ground floor bedroom, the first thing I did when I purchased my new townhouse was get flood insurance. Got into a little bit of argument with my mortgage lender because she said, let me check your flood zone. And I said, I know my flood zone. And she said, let me see if you need flood insurance. And I was like, I'm getting flood insurance. I live on an island. So that's very important to point out that when we talk about these probability maps, the probability maps show different things, but our risk has not changed. We still drive over that bridge to get here every day. Well, you guys don't. I don't either, but other people do. So the other thing that I want to talk to you about, we mentioned Hurricane Irma. Well, Hurricane Irma was a huge storm surge event. What storm surge is the water that is pushed onto the land from the wind. So keep in mind, you have water coming down, you have wind swirling around, and you have water being pushed onto the land. So that is what actual storm surge is. It is more prominent during high tide because you're going to push more water up onto the land and possibly inundate some more areas. So you can see right here, here's mean sea level, which we commonly refer to as 0. Then you have high tide, and then you have the wind and the waves that are pushing that storm surge onto the land. So we try to tie this all together and try to relate it to a category of storm. So here is the most recent storm surge data. It is from 2022. It is NOAA data. The areas that are in red are the areas that are predicted to be inundated by a Category 1 storm at high tide. That's a lot of land area. Almost all the south end, parts of the north end around Skull Creek and stuff around Broad Creek, a lot through here, Palmetto Dunes, Fort Royal. Keep in mind this map builds on it. So Category 1 does not go away. Then we add Category 2, which is the orange right here. South end is completely inundated, 100% inundated. And then we start to pick up these areas on the north end, which is typically higher ground. By the time we get to a Category 3 and a Category 4 storm, it is anticipated that during the high tide event, the entire island will be inundated by some depth of flooding. It may be a half an inch, it may be 20 inches, it may be 40 inches. So trying to tie all that together, now we got wind, we got rainfall, we got storm surge. So we still live in a higher risk area. So another thing that I'd like to talk about is insuring your property. If you have a mortgage on your home, even if you don't, it's very important that you consider flood insurance. I am sure that on the buildings themselves, you guys probably carry flood insurance. Very, very important to do, but flood insurance has been made available to the community since 1977, since we got those first flood maps. And of course, since the town was incorporated in 1984. And all we did was sign a resolution with FEMA saying we're going to adopt an ordinance and enforce those regulations. So we also participate in what's called a community rating system. It is a credit-based system that gives you, as citizens of the town of Hilton Head Island, a 25% discount on your flood insurance premium. If you have a flood insurance policy, look at your declarations page, go to where everything is itemized, and make sure you have something that says CRS or Community Rating System 25%. Everybody in our community is eligible for that 20% because of certain things that we do. Tom and I coming here to talk to you today, I get points for it. All the like natural preservation that we have on here along Broad Creek, and all the extra setback requirements that we have, get you a discount on your insurance. Our stormwater management regulations, our open space preservation, I just said that, and a lot of other things that the town does for our community gets us credit so that we maintain that 25% discount for all of our citizens. Of course, when we talk about flooding, I like to talk about protect yourself. I'm gonna get choked up if you guys have seen the stuff that's happened in Texas. This is very important. I see people driving through across those bridges, and I'm like, want to scream at the TV and just say people are stupid. What is the #1 reason why you should not drive across a flooded road? I hear lots of things. You don't know how deep it is, you can get pushed off. What if the bridge is gone? What if the road's totally gone? That's the biggest thing. The #1 cause of deaths during a flooding event is from people drowning in their vehicles. Once you get stuck in the water, you can't get out. It is very, very difficult to get out. I am not a strong person. I drive a Honda Civic. I know that I could not push those doors open. If I had to, I actually carried an emergency hammer, just in case, just because of who I am. Also, do not walk through. This is one that really got me, a video that I saw. Do not walk through flooded water. These people were watching the water come at them and slowly backed away, and I'm just like, get out of there. Then they go to try to walk out, and the water has come around the other side too, and they were stranded. So do not walk through that flooded water. 6 inches of swiftly moving water could knock you off your feet. That same 6 inches can take my little Honda Civic off the road and sweep me away somewhere. Even if you drive a large vehicle, like a truck that is higher off the ground, 12 inches of water can carry that vehicle off the road. About the only thing that we could probably get through 12 inches of water, which I don't know that Tom will want us to, is some of our fire trucks, just because of the weight, but then there's mechanisms underneath the fire truck and we don't want to lose that equipment. So also protect your property when you go to evacuate. Store your valuables on a layer that is not, or on a level that is not ground floor, or at least put them up on a counter. Put it in plastic containers, get it up off the floor. Even though you may be in a low risk zone, protect your valuables in a safe spot. Also, if you do flood, replace your equipment so that it is elevated above those minimum standards. And if worse comes to worse, and we've worked with some citizens, there is an option to elevate homes in our community. Also, when we talk to people, we just want to go ahead and say, hey, look, we're trying to get people to build responsibly. We encourage people to get building permits before they start. We encourage you to stay back from the water and wetlands, provide yourself an additional buffer, additional setback. Don't maximize the building footprint. The more ground you have around you, the more the water's going to infiltrate. And of course, we like to talk about protecting natural floodplain functions. We want to keep these areas natural to protect all these little guys. Of course, our little beloved sea turtles, we all love them. I saw a video of first hatchling. So they're so cute. Oh my gosh. These guys right here are migratory bird species that are on the endangered species list. These are piping plovers. They roost over in the Port Royal area in the fall. Have you guys ever seen these, rosette spoonbills? Yeah, they're all on Broad Creek. If you want to go see them roost, go to Old Oyster Factory. There's an area where they roost over by Old Oyster Factory. And of course, you guys have seen this, and it's in and around your community where we try to protect the wetlands, try to keep them in as natural of a state as possible, because those areas actually give somewhere for the water to go and for the water to store. And we can pause right now if you have any questions. This is my favorite slide. If you ever see a presentation from me, this is my absolute favorite one. It's never ever going away. But I'd be more than happy to pause for questions. I will be here till the end as well. But it'll just kind of give you a little break if you guys have any questions for me. There's my contact. Yes, sir.
When you have a Tide Point mandatory evacuation, will Tide Point take your guests?
That is a question for you, sir.
We have a High Point mandatory evacuation.
And we have guests visiting us from elsewhere.
Yeah, so I would imagine you've already signed up to evacuate with High Point.
Yes.
I mean, ideally, if it's an emergency situation and there's nowhere else to go, then yes, they'll come with us.
And I'll be here to the end as well. So yes, sir.
We hear all the word about water rise, so this data gets recalculated at some frequency. What is that?
Well, our last flood maps were from 1986, and then we got flood maps 30 years later in 2021. The FEMA cycle is supposed to be every 5 years. However, we are already 4 years in because we got those in 2021. Prior to releasing those maps, we had what's called a scoping meeting, like a data needs for the next map revision, but we have not seen anything. So a lot of time in the last community I came from, we were on about a 12-year cycle. I had gone through 3 different map revisions with my previous community, one as soon as I started, and then I left right before we finished up our last one. So it does take a while because they're doing it not by community or by county, they're doing it by drainage basin. So they're looking at a much larger area when they're doing this modeling, so it's a little bit more complex. So it's gonna be a while.
So the bottom line is it's worse than we see.
Yes, yes, yes ma'am.
What is the recommended buffer zone along the creek out here?
Okay, the question was, what's the recommended buffer zone? We have 2 different regulations that deal with whether they're tidal wetlands or freshwater wetlands. So we deal mostly with the tidal wetlands, especially right here. So the setback for a building is 20 feet, or excuse me, the buffer is 20 feet, and then we have an additional 5-foot setback. So right now we are only at 25 feet. However, the planning staff is in the process of looking at rewriting those regulations and making that buffer bigger. Any other questions?
Yeah. Did you have any issues with cell phone service or gas shortages after a storm?
That is a very good question. Cell phone service and gas or EV chargers or gas stations?
No, I mean a gas station.
A gas station. So the biggest thing is we're going to ask you, and Tom will talk about this in a few minutes, to stay out as long as you can. That gives us time to get everything up and running, to test things. We have had in the past issues with cell phone service when we were trying to do damage assessments. They have recently come in, they being cell phone companies, upgraded some systems, they've installed some boosters, so we see the coverage continually getting better. The thing is that once our community and our citizens start to come back, if we're still in emergency operations, we're still doing damage assessment, we want you to be back home. I don't want anybody to think we want you to stay away. We want you to be home, but we need the room to work, to use the resources that we have here, which does include that cell phone service. So by the time that you guys would come back, we hope that everything is up and running, and then you can settle back into your new normal. So gas station, same thing, just depends on power. One of the things to keep in mind is that we've recently completed, we being the town, in cooperation with Palmetto Electric, an overhead to underground conversion. So all of our power distribution lines are now underground, which is great for our community unless we get some trees that uproot stuff. But if there is not power, it is likely that there is a transmission line outage. Those big lines that come across the bridge that you drive parallel to. There's also some transmission lines that go through Shelter Cove, all those big lines. If one of those is down, it's gonna be a while. So that will keep the gas stations from operating. Any other questions? All right, Tom's got a lot more information for you, and like I said, I'll be here till the end.
There we go. All right, so let's go back to hurricanes. We'll talk about the Hurricane Center. Every year, Hurricane Center does updates products and changes products and starts thinking about new products. Not a lot of changes this year, but there's a couple of pieces that I really want to focus on from a hurricane perspective. This is the current error cone. This is what the Hurricane Center puts out on a regular basis. This is the one that tells us all the good information. So anybody tell me what these two black lines on the outside of that error cone mean? What are those two lines with the space between that? What is that telling us?
The length of the hurricane.
What's that?
The time of the hurricane.
All right, you got time. What else? What about the width of that white area? What's the width of that white area? Not areas being affected, but you're getting heading in the right direction. Who said eye of the storm? Yes, eye of the storm. Exactly right. So this line, or excuse me, these lines here, the two black lines on the outside, tell us where the eye of the storm may be, being the very center. And that is their distance of error. That's how wrong they could be, right? So think that through when you start looking at it. People say, well, we're not in the error cone, it's not fine. Well, if you look at the representation on this storm, look at the error cone and look how large that wind field is compared to the error cone as it's at the bottom here. So at the bottom here, that's still the error rate, but look at the size of that wind field, right? So all that is telling us is the eye of the storm is somewhere in that cone. So the Hurricane Center realized that it's probably not, this whole picture it's not conveying a good picture. It's not conveying, giving all the information that folks need. So last year they created a new version of the cone. So what this is your standard error cone, the normal cone there. This representation just doesn't have the lines on it, but you still normal error cone. But the big change is up here, right? Those are watches and warnings, and the entire area that the watch and warning covers. So let's go back to this cone. So you can see that red there is a hurricane warning. So if you look at that, where do you think the hurricane warning is or may be? Right on the coast, right? Really on the coast. But if you flip over back to this one, that's a hurricane warning. So it visually tells you where the hurricane warning is. So that helps us provide you additional information, helps get additional information out. I mean, I am very excited as to where this cone is going to go and the information it's providing. So another thing is, so the X-ray here represents where the cone is at the time the error, this graphic came out. So look to the right. Look how much of that storm is to the right. Exactly. So as that storm moves up, the eye may land here, but that entire storm is over here, right? Most of that wind field is over here. So don't pay attention to the error cone per se. That's just a piece of information. There's so much good information here now. You got your hurricane warning, tropical storm warning, tropical storm watch, right? Other thing I tell people who are evacuating, this is a much better tool than this. So now I'm making the decision to evacuate. Where do I want to go? I'm looking at these watches and warnings. I may want to go up here to the watch area, that may be fine, but if I don't want to be anywhere in this, I'm going to evacuate out of it. So it helps you make better decisions if you're evacuating on your own. So here is the most recent storm that we just had. right? As you can see, much smaller storm, but you can see where the watches and the warnings are. So just a visual representation. And again, look at the storm. I don't know if any of you guys saw that storm on radar. The entire storm was to the right-hand side of the eye. So as that storm went by, everything up here is where all that rain and all the wind bands and the rain bands were. So great tool, and I really love where this is going. All right, so let's talk about preparedness. Let's talk about planning. Preparedness at its simplest form. It's all about you, right? It's where you are in your life. I'm assuming nobody in here has a newborn. Right? Is that a fair assumption?
Fair assumption.
Okay, fair point. He said that he knows that. So exactly. So you're not gonna prepare with diapers and wipes and things like that for a baby, right? Exactly. So it's all about you and where you are in your life at this point. So let's talk about emergency kit in its simplest form. What are some things that you're going to put in your emergency kit to take with you when you evacuate?
Medications.
Drugs, yes, meds. What else?
Toilet paper.
Roll paper. I'll give you that one. Don't go without that. What else?
Cash and small bills.
Cash. Cash is king. Yep. What else?
Emergency radio.
All your important paperwork. Yep. What over here?
Emergency radio.
Emergency radio. Right from here. What else?
Credit cards.
Yep. You got your credit cards. What other things are you going to take with you? Water, exactly. I got with your spouse. Well, so I saw some question marks when you said that out loud. All right, water. How much water are we taking? Or how much water should we have?
Enough for 3 days.
3 days. Gallon per person per day is roughly what FEMA recommends. What other things are we thinking about? Chargers, exactly right. So let's pause on chargers. How many electronic devices do you guys have that need to be plugged in? Right. It depends, right? Myself, I have 5, maybe 6, depending on what I'm taking with me, right? So if you were to evacuate to a hotel, how easy are plugs to find in a hotel? Right, there are not many plugs in a hotel, so if you know that there's 2 of you and you've each got 4 things that need to be plugged in, that's 8 total, you're gonna need 8 plugs. So maybe an extension cord, maybe a power strip, things like that. What are some other things we need to keep in our kit?
Dog food.
Right, exactly. If you have a pet, stuff for your pets. Exactly right. All right, let's kind of see how we did. So we got our food, water, toiletries, prescriptions, clothing, papers. We talked about checkbook and cash. Obviously, you guys don't need baby supplies, but apparently you might.
I'll let you know.
That's right, exactly. Appreciate it. So if you take this list in its simplest form, minus the important papers, what could that look like? What else could you be planning for? Even simpler than that. How about a vacation? Right? When you go on vacation, you're taking snacks.
Yep.
You're taking your toiletries, you're taking your prescription meds, any stuff you need, clothing, you're taking your ID and that type of stuff, checkbook, cash, supplies, things like that. So don't overcomplicate the preparedness piece of it. Think about, I'm gonna start with a vacation and then go from there. The other thing with your emergency kit is, a lot of people think about the emergency kit is, I need this to evacuate with. Not necessarily the case. This kit can be very valuable here. Let's say we have an extended power outage. Let's say a small tornado comes through the area and you're stuck in your house for a day or 2. These supplies can come in very handy. So if you take your kit to evacuate, hopefully you're going someplace you don't need the supplies, right? But if you do, make sure you replenish it before you get back. Because when you get back, there may be, as Sherry mentioned, there may be some power outage issues. There may be issues with some of the other utilities. So just be prepared for some of those things that may happen. All right, special medical equipment. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but just things to think about, especially if you're evacuating on your own. If you're evacuating on your own, you have oxygen or a concentration machine. Think about, where am I going? And is there a vendor there that can repair that machine? Can I refill my tanks? Can I refill whatever? Can I get my piece of equipment worked on? Just think about that as you begin to leave. Think about owner's manuals or copies of the owner's manuals, the manufacturer's phone number. Things that you may need to be able to get that piece of equipment serviced or fixed. All right, preparedness guide. We have preparedness guides for you guys on the way out. We'll make sure you get a copy of it. It's a small pocket type guide that's very easy to open, very easy to read. You can drop it in your emergency kit, you can make notes in it. It's a good resource. That's a QR code that takes you to the town's website. On the town's website, it is available in multiple versions. So you can get it in PDF, you can download it in this size, really small, or you can just download it in 8.5 by 11. So it's full pages. And that allows you to download the pages that you want if you don't want the whole thing. The other way we have it is an issue. It's like a magazine format, so you can sit online and actually touch the arrow and it literally turns the page and you can read it. So we have it in multiple formats in English and Spanish. And we have both available here if anybody wants those. So now I'll just take a few minutes to talk about the town. One of the things that I've learned over the course of being here is if you guys have evacuated, it really helps. We can provide you all the information you want. If you don't understand or have some concept of what we do behind the scenes, sometimes that information doesn't, it's like, why are they doing that? It doesn't make any sense. So what I'd like to do is take a few minutes and talk about what we do, why we do, and how we do it from an emergency management standpoint. I don't expect you to see this, but this is our organizational chart for our Emergency Operations Center. So we have an Emergency Operations Center where we come together collectively and respond to the storm from a command and control standpoint. So really quickly, I just want to point out, like right across the top here, you can see logistics, planning, operations, public safety and intelligence, and finance. So from here up, that looks like any organizational chart for any disaster or large wildfire in the country. If you were to go to Texas right now through the flooding, that large incident command post that they have looks just like this at the top. You got an incident commander, safety, you got some help, you got IT, you got a public information officer, and you have logistics, planning, ops, finance, and public safety and intelligence. All those things look exactly the same. That's one of the first things that I did when I got here is to shift us more into this model to make us look like any other incident in the country. The reason I did that is because we're small, right? We don't have a lot of people, we don't have a lot of staff. So there are groups out there called incident management teams. Anybody heard of an incident management team? No. So they are a group of highly trained individuals that do all of these jobs. And they're designed to go anywhere in the country and do that job. We have several incident management teams in South Carolina. There's one in Charleston, there's one in Columbia. The Forestry Department has a team. So when we get deep into an event, for Hurricane Matthew, this collective worked for 17 days without a break. Right? My bad, we should have called an incident management team in on probably day 10 to get some help. We didn't do that. So the reason we're designed like that is now we can call that team in, or we can call for one person. Like if we need somebody to relieve me, we can call one person in that does incident command stuff. They can come in and fill that role, and then I can take a break. So that's why we did that. And then below it, we looked just like the town. We organize as much as we can like the town. So when you leave your quote unquote your town office or your town spot, you come to the EOC, you're doing a similar job. Great example is shop. We have a shop unit. The town has a maintenance shop that does all the work on fire trucks, ambulances, all the cars, chainsaws, everything that we have. They fold into our organizational chart as the shop unit. Same guys doing the same job, it just falls into the organizational chart. Another one is our supply unit. We have somebody who provides supplies to the town, toilet paper, pencils, pens, all those things, delivers them out. When we open up, they fall into that organizational chart and they're called the supply unit. So we try to keep people doing a similar job as they can. So that's our organizational chart, that's kind of how we work. When our EOC is open, it's anywhere from 35 to 40 people in the building managing the storm. Really quick, I'll kind of walk through. This is our EOC opening and when we operate at its simplest level. As simple as you can possibly get it. Something happens, all right? We have an initial EOC meeting. That means we start talking, we start having a conversation. An example is a hurricane. We have a hurricane that's 5 days out. We may have that initial meeting and say, hey, we're 5 days out, a small collective. It could be as small as myself, the mayor, and the town manager. It just depends on where the storm is, how big it is, and what it looks like. Then we continue to have meetings, and with each one of those meetings, most likely virtual in the beginning, those meetings begin to get larger. We start bringing in ops plans, logistics, finance, public safety, and intelligence. We start growing in the meeting until we ultimately get to the point where we need to open our EOC. So the building is now open. And then we go into what we call the planning peak. Again, that's a national process that is done anywhere in the world, and it's run by our planning section. So if you go back to the org chart, that planning section is, in my opinion, the most important piece of our EOC because they're doing most of the heavy lifting. So we go to what we call a planning peak. Kind of ironic name because it looks like a peak, huh? So this bottom piece is what I just showed you. Something happens and we go into meeting mode and preparing to open our emergency operations center. Then when we open up, we sit in this circle on a continuous basis and do not stop until the event is over. All right. So when I said we were open for 17 days, we made that circle for Hurricane Matthew 17 times. We do it every single day. And if we don't flow as well, we don't work as well. So here, in its simplest form, here's kind of what we do. In the morning, what is today? Today's the 10th. So yesterday, we made a plan for today. We come into the EOC in the morning, I brief the plan, and we start executing our plan for today. All right? So we have our plan for today, now we need to make our plan for tomorrow. So roughly around 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, we have an objectives meeting where I meet with the plans chief and say, here's what I believe our objectives are for tomorrow should be. You know, A, B, C, and D, and I lay them out for you. Then we go into an objectives meeting where the plans chief runs, and we have ops plans, finance, logistics, public safety and intelligence, and the PIF all in a room going, hey, here are the objectives, anything we're missing, anything you're concerned about, anything we need to add. So then we establish our objectives for tomorrow. We're still working our plan for today. We come back out, and then now we're going to figure out our strategy. So each section is going, this is my objective to accomplish. I need to develop strategies on how to accomplish that objective. So if our objective is to move half of our forces off the island by 10 o'clock tomorrow evening, the operations section has to come up with a plan on how to move those forces off the island by that time. So we come back in, have our strategy meeting. Again, we're still working our plan for today. We have our strategy meeting. We all come together. Operations says, I can do this, I can do that, but I need something I don't have. Then logistics is sitting in the room so I can get that for you. We can take care of that. Or no, we can't. We have to figure out a different way to do that. So once we have our strategy meeting, we're comfortable with what we're going to do, why we're going to do, how we're going to do it. We come back out, we continue to work our plan, and then at the end of the day, the plans chief has a planning meeting. So he briefs the entire room on our objectives for tomorrow and our strategies for tomorrow. Right? And then the plans chief will walk around the room. He'll walk over to the ops chief and go, are you good with the plan? And the ops chief will go, yes. Logistics, are you good with the plan? Yes. Finance, are you good with the plan? Public safety, are you good with the plan? Plans chief, I'm good with the plan. Finance, are you good with the plan? And then he turns to me and says, Tom, are you good with the plan? And I say, yes. Then he prints it, I sign it, and then tomorrow morning we come in, here's our plan for today, I brief the plan, we start to execute our plan, and then we start the whole process all over again. So there's a whole lot of thinking and moving that goes into everything that we do. So when we see things happening, it's not just a knee-jerk decision, it is a complete planning process associated with that. Before I forget, I get in trouble. Sherry won't talk to me for a week. The planning section does a whole lot more stuff. Sherry's in the planning section, that's why I said that. So the planning section does a whole lot more stuff. So they're building that plan. They're also developing a situation report for us. All right, Sherry runs our situation unit. So that group is calling every gated community, every long-term care facility, gas station, grocery store, you name the utility partners, our hotels. Thank you. I knew there was a big officer day. Yeah. They're calling all of them saying, what's your status? What are you doing? How are you doing? What can we do? To make sure that we stay together and we're communicating. And they develop an entire situation report for us with every day of the event. So they're not only building our plan, helping execute the plan, they're also doing that. And they're also collecting all the documentation from the event. So anything that we do, they get the paper or the electronic information to organize so we have it later for that FEMA reimbursement piece. So they're busy. All right, evacuation. So we'll talk about evacuation really quick. You already heard the governor's the only one that can make an evacuation order, right? How many evacuation orders can he give? He has options. There are multiple evacuation orders that he can give. What do you think they are? Or how many do you think there are?
6.
Who said 2? Two, exactly. There's two evacuation orders that he can give. Years ago, there was a third that was called voluntary evacuation, but that one doesn't exist anymore, so don't use that terminology. So the first one is mandatory medical. That's when you guys are leaving. That's what we just talked about earlier. So mandatory medical is what comes first. Historically, there's a mandatory medical, and then roughly 24-ish hours after the mandatory medical evacuation order is given, the public evacuation order will come. Just depends on timing and the storm and those types of things. So mandatory medical, and then the public evacuation soon follows. If you have a cell phone and you use your apps on your phone, or they have a website as well. South Carolina Department of Transportation is called 511 South Carolina Traffic. That's a great app that you can download, especially if you're evacuating yourself. There's a little toggle on there, it's kind of hard to see in the picture, but it says evacuation routes. You hit that button, it turns on, and it turns the evacuation routes on. So you can see the evacuation routes. It also puts on there major accidents, major traffic delays, things like that. It's a great piece of information for you. And I'll leave you a copy of the slide deck if you want to share it out with everybody so that you can get that. But they're a great resource. One of the evacuation partners that we don't talk about a lot is Palmetto Breeze. So anybody who is unable to evacuate themselves, doesn't have transportation, what have you, Palmetto Breeze will pick you up and take you to a public shelter, most likely in Jasper County. So one of the questions we get a lot about is our evacuation. What do we do and how do we do it? So our evacuation is phased. It's based on categories of the storm. So that's kind of our starting point. So for tropical storm category 1, the town as a whole, on the public safety EOC side, we will most likely stay put. We will house in our hardened buildings, in our EOC. We may move some folks around, for example, the fire station in Sea Pines, we may pull them out. Shipyard down near Caligula, we may move them away from the coastline, but for the most part, we're probably going to stay put for a 1. For a category 2, that's where we get kind of get up a toss up. We can potentially, well, either stay in place, depending on trajectory of the storm, where it's at. But more likely is we'll either split in half. So half of our forces off island to USCB in Bluffton, and half of our forces will stay here. Or we will totally evacuate all of our forces. For a 3, we're leaving. We're most likely going to be in Bluffton at USCB. And for a category 4 or 5, we definitely 100% evacuate. And then we go to our secondary evacuation point, which is Barnwell County. I don't know if anybody's ever been to Barnwell before, but it's a long way. It's 100, roughly 80 miles. So for folks who make the decision not to leave, and we leave, what's available to you as far as public safety? Exactly, there's nothing here. During Hurricane Matthew, when we left, our 911 center closed. So we have a 911 center on the island, it shut down. They evacuated that staff to USCB. So when you call 911, it transferred to Beaufort County. And what do you think they did? What's your name? Cool. Where are you? Nice. What's wrong? Okay. We'll let them know and they'll get to you when they get back. Because there's nobody here, right? There's nothing that we can do for you because we're there. So I also get a lot of questions, why do we move forces off the island and why do we go to Barnwell, which is a long way away? So we do that because the people inside of these things and these things right here, those ambulances and fire trucks, that's the last convoy leaving the island after Hurricane Matthew. So just out of curiosity, that ladder truck there, if we keep it too close and it gets damaged and we lose it from damage, what do you think it costs us to replace that thing? How much? $250,000? Anybody else? $2 million? Oh, I got $1 million. So you're in the ballpark. About $2.5 million to replace that ladder truck. Okay? We have 2. What do you think the wait time is for a ladder truck right now? It's about 1.5 to 2 years, depending on. But if you compound that now, we have a storm, multiple places have lost vehicles. That's going to extend that time even further out. So we've got 2 of those. We've got 10 engine companies, 10 engines, 10 ambulances, and 2 Quints, which are an engine and ladder combined. So that's why we take that equipment off the island, because we need to make sure that it stays safe. It's insured, but if we don't have it to be able to use, that's our problem. All right, here's a couple of pictures of us at USCB. That's our, at USCB during Matthew, that's our base camp. It was 799 people at USCB. waiting for Hurricane Matthew to pass by and for us to come back to work. That's pretty much all the public safety in Beaufort County on the south of the broadside. And here's a great picture I like to edit. That's the gym at USCB, but here is the route to Barnwell. I don't know if you guys can see that. It's 78 miles in an hour and 33 minutes with no traffic. So if there's a hurricane coming, what do you think that's going to take us? Yeah, it's going to take us a bit, right? Because there's still going to be traffic on there, and our problem is fuel too. It's 78 miles, right? What do you think a ladder truck gets to the gallon, miles per gallon?
Not much.
Anybody got a guess? 10? I'd love to get 10. It's about 1 mile to the gallon. Ish. Right? Ish. So you're thinking 1 mile to the gallon, we're going 78 miles, it's a 100-gallon tank. Well, we're also idling or stop and go traffic. So fuel is a big problem for us when we go there. We've got a great fuel plan, but it's still, that's another thing that we have to think about as we're moving out. All right, so let's talk re-entry. So the county has a re-entry program that is run by the sheriff's office, and all the municipalities partake in the plan. So there are re-entry cards that we issue. So there's a pass above that they don't really talk about. That's for the gated communities, things like that have SLED, armed security. They get to come back the same time we do. They've got a special card for that. Tier 1 is essentially that extra bit of public safety resources. It's our heavy debris contractor. It's, items that are going to support us in what we do. Tier 2 is some additional essential personnel. That's when we start getting some of the gated communities can bring back their stormwater folks because they're part of our stormwater system. Those are some of the parts and pieces that begin to come back. So really, Tier 1 and 2 are to support heavy operations and begin to open the town back up. Tier 3 is when it starts to open up a little bit. Your general manager and your operations guy gets to come back at Tier 3. And the reason we do that is because he can come back and do an evaluation. So if you guys are evacuated with the facility, they can get back and go, no, we can't open back up. We need to make a longer term plan and begin to put this place back together. So that's why they get to come in and be able to do that. We do the same thing with the gated communities and drugstores, grocery stores, all that. That's that Tier 3 wave of people coming back. And then Tier 4 is assuming that the community here is ready for you to come back. If you evacuate on your own, you just need a driver's license and or your paid property tax bill. So most likely your driver's license, if you're obviously evacuating on your own, you'll need your driver's license to say Hilton Head Island, or your tax bill with your address on there, a paid tax bill with your address on there, and a driver's license to validate who you are, and that'll get you in for Tier 4. So, who was here for Matthew? Yeah. Anybody get caught up in the traffic coming back on? Yeah. So some of the things that we learned, especially on the town side, is we realized that we need to do a whole lot of things faster. Like we went slow on some things. For example, we didn't cut trees at night. We weren't out there because we got lots of street lights, right? Yeah. Plenty of availability to see. We were concerned about cutting trees at night, visibility, and those types of things. So we realize now that with our contractor and the resources that they have, we can cut trees at night. Not as fast, but we can continue to move. So I think this tier process will move much faster than it did for Hurricane Matthew. I just throw this up there just from a recovery standpoint. It's just an interesting number. This is Hurricane Matthew. We had 120,000 downed trees. We had $2+ million of debris.
This isn't Beaufort County?
Correct. This is Hilton Head Island alone. And we had $44 million. It cost $44 million to remove that debris. Now, Sherry mentioned that Matthew was a windstorm. Irma was for most part, a water storm. All right, now put those together and it's a bigger storm. We got decent storm surge plus a whole lot of wind. Now we're not only, this is just trees. So if you guys are here for Matthew, you know how long it took us to pick up those trees. Now, let's compound that with construction debris, white goods, hazardous materials, things like that coming out of garages. It's going to be a much more extended time. We filled up Honeycomb with just trees. So now we have to find places to put all that stuff, and then not only put it, compound it, crunch it down, and then take it somewhere else. So just be aware that a debris operation for a bigger storm is going to take much, much more time. All right, there's just some ways you can get information from the town. If you go to the town's website on the right-hand side, there, that's all of our social media, YouTube and all that stuff. One of the things that we do is flip our town website over. So if you go to the town's website now, you can see all the stuff that's going on. But when we go to storm mode, that website flips over and it's everything that's related to the storm. And if you don't have Facebook and you want to scroll Facebook, we actually put our Facebook feed on the main page so you can scroll that. So our website is the place to go. Facebook is the fastest because usually it drops there first and then the website catches up a little bit behind it. So think about that. And if you like videos, you can go to our YouTube channel and you'll see messages from the mayor. You may see my ugly mug on a video or two. So just, that's a great place for information. Beaufort County has continues to do a good job with their social media. They get better and better every year. If you don't have Nixle and you're interested, you can Google Nixle, Beaufort County, South Carolina. If you just put Beaufort, sometimes it'll take you to Beaufort, North Carolina, so just pay attention to which one you're doing. So they've done a great job with their Nixle account, Facebook, and their Twitter account. So their social media continues to get better. And just lastly, here's just a couple of other things that we've done over the course of a couple of years is just like getting EMAP accredited, we like to test our plans against anything that we can. So we're tsunami ready, which the National Weather Service gives. So they come down, evaluate our plan, and look at what we're doing. They participate in exercises that we've done. So they designate us and Beaufort County as storm ready and tsunami ready. So similar processes. And we're also Hurricane Strong, which is through the Safe Home Coalition, and that's more related to a lot of the stuff Sherry does and the building department does with some of our codes and regulations. So we've got all of those designations. And with that, I will stop talking. That's my contact information, and can I answer any questions?
Thank you, sir.
Oh, all right, yes, ma'am.
The weather state, I hear that the satellites are being taken down because of the cut in the weather department.
Sure.
Is this going to affect our ability to understand the storm?
My understanding, and I had a small conversation with the Weather Service the other day. Our question was about some of the satellites that were taken down. Or they're not taken down, but the Weather Service has lost access to. There was a couple of military satellites. And in conversations with the Weather Service, they don't actually use the data from those locally. The Hurricane Center does a little bit, but they have multiple tools to supplement what they don't have access to anymore. So at this point, there's not a lot of concern with that particular piece.
Hey Tom, will you talk real quick about the evacuation order and when the governor lifts the evacuation
Oh,
order?
yes, I'm sorry, I completely forgot that. Yep, sorry. I'll take a step backwards there, I forgot. So on the other side of the evacuation order, when it comes to, I can't keep it under speaker, when it comes to re-entry, pay attention to what the governor says. A great example, and I'll take it down to its simplest form. Let's say this is the governor's evacuation order. Governor McMaster says, I'm ordering evacuation of Beaufort County. He gets to a point, he's gonna say, I don't want this anymore. So what he does is he essentially hands it over to us and says, the evacuation order is yours, do with it as you see fit, right? That doesn't mean you can come back. That just means he has relinquished his order. One of the things that happened during Hurricane Matthew is Governor Nikki Haley said, I'm rescinding my evacuation order and I am returning it to local authority, which means I don't want it, I'm giving it to you. Unfortunately, what happened is that on the news side of it, it was communicated that Beaufort County is open. So the Weather Channel everywhere had us as open, but that was not the case. So even when you hear the governor say, I'm lifting my evacuation order or what have you, it's just they're giving it to us at this point. And then so from that point, go to the town's website to see what we're saying, or in Beaufort County to see what we're saying. And then, even if it says the town is open and you've evacuated on your own, go back to the community and say, can we come back? And I'm sure you guys have an amazing plan to communicate that with you. So just pay attention to those three pieces. It's the governor, then it's us, then it's your community. Yes, ma'am.
I understand the fire department remains on island during the storm.
Yes and no. It depends on the level of storm. For example, Hurricane Matthew, we completely left. There were no fire, EMS, or police or law enforcement on the island. So if there's an evacuation order, make the assumption there's no one here. Even though we may stay, but make the assumption no one's here, because you don't know what we're going to do. We're not going to publicly say we're staying, okay? Because we don't want to present that false assumption that, well, the fire department's staying, I'm good. we're gonna act like we're leaving too, and they decide to stay. So I would make the assumption that we're leaving. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Are you able to indicate where your EOC is?
Yes, absolutely. We have leased space, so we rent a room, a couple of rooms on the top of Hilton Head Public Service District. It's behind, what's the shopping center? Port Royal Plaza, thank you, yeah. We're right behind Port Royal Plaza, so our 911 center is there and our emergency operations center is there. Yes, sir.
So have there been any cuts of personnel at the local, county, state level that are concerned, or even the federal level?
The question was, is there any concern with, or had there been any cuts local, state, or local, county, state, or federal level that are of concern? Local level, I'm just one guy. I'd love to have another. If you're available, we can talk about hiring.